Welcome to the Job Shop Show, where we talk with the owners, suppliers, partners, and customers of custom manufacturers. Listen and learn the secrets of top-performing job shops, the tools, techniques, and backgrounds that have made them successful, all in the quest of raising the bar for custom manufacturing. I'm your host, Jay Jacobs. This episode is sponsored by Paperless Parts, connecting buyers and suppliers of custom manufactured parts. The Paperless platform is a secure, ITAR-compliant, cloud-based manufacturing system for suppliers that reduces the amount of time spent on sales, estimating, quoting, administration, and order processing. It offers seamless integration with the accounting and ERP software tools that shops already use, such as QuickBooks, E2, and JobBoss. Paperless Parts was founded with a mission to make manufacturing more accessible by streamlining the quote-to-cash process. Spend less time quoting and more time selling.
Shazam! This is Jay Jacob. Welcome back once again to the Job Shop Show. In this episode, my partner and co-founder, Jason Ray, he's also CEO of Paperless Parts, well, he and I sat down to have a free-ranging conversation about one of the most pivotal challenges growing shops face: cost allocation when scaling up. Jason and I break down a real-world situation, a scenario where a shop needs to offer a competitive bid to win a potentially game-changing $2 million job. But they're struggling to make the numbers work at the current shop rate, which at that rate, they won't win the job. So we look at different strategies on how to determine if a lower price makes sense and its impact on the P&L, shop capacity, and overhead allocation. From understanding the overhead and EBITDA implications to making the leap to second and third shift, this episode is packed with practical strategies and candid insights for shops aiming to grow smart and sustainably. If you want to watch the video which shows the spreadsheet, head over to Paperless Parts YouTube channel. Right, let's get into it.
All right, Jay. So I was having a conversation with one of our customers the other day. The shop is growing. He's doing really well, scaling up big time. It's exciting, really exciting times. And he and the shop have earned their way into getting some really big RFQs, which is sweet. They're faster to respond. They're more effective. The customer's starting to believe that they can take on bigger packages of work. And now he's got this package that has come across his desk, and just eyeballing it, he's like, this is game changer. Like, this is add a shift, add part of a shift, go hire people, like grow my business, double-digit percentage points type work.
Mm-hmm.
But the conversation we had was more of it's exciting, but I don't think I'll win the work under my current cost structure. And he said to me, he's like, how do you think about this? And of course, I was sitting there and I was like, well, I know someone that knows this so much better than I do, so let me go chat with Jay. So that's the context. I put together a little spreadsheet for us to chat about this, but I know as you were scaling rapid, you probably had to think through this pretty often as you were going from one shift, filling a shift, going to a second shift, filling that shift, going to a third shift, filling that shift. And I know at Rapid, it was a little bit of a different beast because you were selling time, and time always maintains a very high value. This is a little bit of a slightly different beast where I'm selling parts and maybe a little bit of time, but it is a long run LTA type job. Cool? To set the context.
Yeah.
So here's my spreadsheet, and you can tell me where I may have made this incorrect or potentially I'm not thinking about the math the right way. So this is current state right here. We've got shop running one shift. They're doing about 10 million in revenue. Their material cost each year is about $3 million. The direct labor, 2.5 million. Overhead, 30%, 3 million. And they're right around 1.5 million in profit.
And let's be clear that that's EBITDA, because principal payments on debt, depending on how a shop looks at it, can really impact cash flow.
Awesome. So yes, that's exactly what we should be doing. So this is a similar structure to what I see in a lot of our customers today. I didn't feel like any of these numbers were way off. But then we got to the scenario, and the shop owner said to me, he's like, look, Jason, this is a $2 million job. He's like, so under my current cost structure, it would kind of look like this. Now, obviously, there's the nuances, and he has to go in and cost it out. But now we're sitting here and we're looking at this, and I'm really wondering if he's got a shot at winning the job.
Yeah. Yeah. The production business, the trade-off is you have long-term guaranteed work, and therefore there is less risk of revenue fluctuations. Hopefully you're not a semiconductor equipment supplier where the stuff goes up and down like a pogo stick. But let's say it's consistent. So that's the trade-off. You have to make the parts at a lower price, be very efficient, and therefore you can, you have the foundational revenue, I guess, if you want to look at that way for your shop.
Let me ask you a question. Does that mean it makes sense to get aggressive with a job like this job? I felt very excited for him that he was getting this opportunity to go after this work. It felt like the chance to break into that next shift.
Let's talk about each of those categories. And this is the way I looked at it is, first of all, your material, perhaps you can get some material discount breaks on the job. That depends how you write the contract too, whether price increases are passed along or savings are passed along to your customer or not. But let's assume material is what it is. That's that you can't finagle your EBITDA number on that. And direct labor, your direct labor may be a little less because you're probably in a production job going to have less skilled people, unless you've just been doing high volume or even medium volume production. But let's just say the direct labor number is roughly where it is.
Let me ask you a question on that really quick, Jay. While we're talking about direct labor, you had a philosophy with how you were able to staff the second and the third shift.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share that a little bit? Because I think a lot of folks, they struggle to hire second and third shift, and you end up in a situation where you go and you win this amazing work, but now you can't put the people where you need them.
Yeah, well, it seems a little off, but I found third shift easier to staff than second shift, and it's more of a lifestyle for those people, and they either like to work at night or they have a family situation where they have a partner and maybe they have children. So someone needs to take care of the kids during the day, or at least be around to get them off the bus while the other person works the day shift. So we found that probably half of the folks on the third shift had a life choice like that, a lifestyle where third shift made a lot more sense. When you're running 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock, it's disruptive. And so that's why we found it a little tougher to staff that. The con of a third shift is there's no transition point between the first and the third shift. It has to be totally in written documentation. And I remember Rudy Stahl, who he was the general manager at Rapid Machining when we started. He had a great philosophy. He said, we just gave them a goal, and it was a very realistic goal. And that's what they were supposed to do at night. And if they hit it, great. If they did more, wow. But he left the expectation pretty low there. And by having a lower expectation, we actually met our expectations.
Do you have to pay more?
Yeah, you have to pay a little bit of a premium. Yeah. But on the flip side is, as you put in a second and third shift, you don't necessarily have to pay the overtime because you've got the continual people. So there is some savings in not paying overtime.
Okay. So you think no matter how you skin it here, this probably shakes out somewhere in the same, maybe a little less if it's long run production. You can automate some of it.
Automate, or the people are less skilled. The other thing is, if you do want to start a second or third shift, hire people who are already doing that. Try to take them from your competitors. Don't try to switch somebody from a first shift to one of those two. That's a disaster.
Ah, that's really good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other thing that's important, the EBITDA number, and we grew at 32% a year, and we always had 20% plus EBITDA, and I insisted on that. I said I'd rather not grow than have less than 20% EBITDA. And why that's important is you are fueling growth with the cash flow from that type of an EBITDA. And you've got to pay your taxes. You've got to pay for the cash items to fuel the growth. You're also probably either, well, perhaps both. You're putting on more space at times, and then you also are buying more equipment. And both of those will have a loan payment where there's principal and interest. Interest is on your EBITDA, but the principal is not. And that gets back to what I was talking about, the cash flow. You've got to be able to cover that principal. And then, yeah, it'd be nice to take a little bit home too. So that wasn't really the case when we were growing at 32%. I didn't really take any extra money home. I was paid fairly, but I kept investing back into the business, and that's the EBITDA number that I needed. So if you look here, you're growing 20%, that 15% EBITDA seems pretty realistic, and therefore you don't want to go below that 15% EBITDA. You also probably, and this is what I've seen, you will be paid in more of a net 60 or a net 90 for production work, as opposed to some of the shorter run prototype, high mix, low volume type parts. So your cash is also going to not be as readily available to you as that's the other type of work that you may be used to.
That's a great point as well. So this overhead seems to be the place where folks get stuck.
Yeah.
And I think that I think it's kind of an interesting problem. And maybe I think this is where people tend to struggle a bit because they want to take on the growth, but they might be a little bit too expensive to win these big jobs. But then if you go and cut all of your overhead out, now you're talking about a lot of risk. And, I tend to see shops that are trying to take this leap. They are also spreading the peanut butter. So the overhead is electricity. The overhead has a lot of potentially variable costs that aren't fixed. And that lack of understanding of fixed and variable costs feels like something that can kind of bite you, like
Yeah, well, this is where I like numbers. So I dug into this in the shop, and I really understood in my overhead what were fixed costs and what were variable costs, and I was able to model them. And this, I think, is the opportunity where you can lower the price and not allocate as much overhead. So electricity definitely is a variable cost. However, your mortgage payment or lease payment or whatever you're doing for the building, that's static. Your insurance cost is probably the same, except for the additional cost for the labor that you may need to hire. So if you are trying to leverage open machine time, then you will not be buying any new machinery, or perhaps it's not to the level of what you would be buying it for your previous revenue growth. So there's probably some savings in principal and interest payments. Again, you go through your whole overhead, what those items are, and what ones that are variable? What are the ones that are fixed? And it depends how much you want to grow. I would never look at an opportunity like that and say, I'm going to take out $2 million of other business. I would look at it as it's going to be a creative. It's going to end up with 12 million in sales. And therefore, I'm building that foundation for growth. And I also think that a lot of people look at growth as a curve. And I think it's more of a step function where you add a bunch of revenue and stuff, and then you've got to digest it. And you have to do that, no matter whether you get taking a $2 million job or you're taking a bunch of smaller jobs to add another 2 million. There's these step functions where you bring in processes, maybe new equipment, maybe maybe more the unskilled people, where that's a different way of your shop thinking about it. The manufacturing instruction set has to be done a little better and clearer. So if you're willing to take that jump, if you want to take that jump, then you don't want to sacrifice your EBITDA, but you got to figure out how to. There's going to be a lot of pain potentially along the way as you figure it out.
With big jobs like this, I find often that the buyer is using some sort of a should cost system. So the buyer is sitting there and they're trying to figure out, okay, well, and I think what we have here is very high level and it paints with broad strokes, but you end up in a situation as well where if I'm a shop owner and I buy a $1.2 million laser and I want to pay that laser back in, call it 6 years. So that means I need to generate $200,000 a year. And obviously there's interest and maintenance and everything else, but let's just say it's $200,000 a year for me to break even. Now let's say I'm running that laser at 2,000 hours a year. That's where I'm at. That's my utilization on that equipment. So we're at $100 an hour. So I'm running one shift. I'm running the laser one shift. I'm getting my 2,000 hours, which you and I both know is unrealistic. Probably more like 1,500 if we're lucky. But I've calculated this $100 per hour rate for my laser. Well, now I'm going up against an OEM buyer who's saying, my expectation of you as a shop is that you're running your equipment at 70% of the time. So now instead of 2,000 hours, you actually should be running it at just over 5,000 hours. And so that's a pretty huge reduction in hourly cost. Now, obviously, cost and price are dramatically different. But if I'm the buyer and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, well, an hour of laser time should be $50 an hour, then you're a shop saying, well, we only run one shift and I need to make back my $100 an hour in order to make sure that I break even in 6 years and I can buy new equipment. Seems like ships passing in the night. Like, what? How do you thread this? Like, I hear so many of our customers wanting to grow. They want to scale, but they're going in with bids and the OEMs are coming back and they're saying, you are you're high. So is that just negotiations? What do you think there?
I think this is where you make the decision on what you want the future of your shop to look like. And it's a jump. To amortize the hours as the OEMs want you to, you're going to have to run more than one shift. And that's where you've got to make a decision. Is that what you want to do as a shop owner? And you want to grow and you want these bigger contracts, or are you not willing to make that sacrifice? Because they're right. You have a lot of unallocated capacity, and that's not their problem. And there are other shops, and that's why you lose the job to other shops, because they've made that jump and they've figured it out. And so that's not an issue for them. They're able to get much higher utilization on their lasers and other equipment.
And do you just take it on risk? You just say, I'm going to go do this, or you go back to the OEM and say, well, fill the shift. Like, I'll give you that rate, but you got to fill the like, what's the play?
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it is what's it going to cost? Let's assume you're going to do all this 2 million on third shift. Price it out. What's it going to cost you to build out a third shift? And then is that something you can leverage to bring even more, another $2 million contract on top of that once you've worked out the bugs and the kinks? It's a jump. It's a commitment. And the other thing I should point out, whenever you have shifts, I remember this is something one of the reasons we automated so much at Rapid is when you're a smaller shop, and 10 million even can fall into this category. If you've got a problem or question, you can go in and see the programmer. You can go out in the shop and have discussions. That when you have a third shift or even a second shift, there's a pass off point perhaps, and maybe there's a little bit of overlap with I'll say overhead people in the shop, but people don't want to get called at 9 o'clock at night on every little problem that shows up. So you have to have a way of capturing everything that's required to run that job in the manufacturing instruction set. And when I say manufacturing instruction set, that's the router, that's the notes on the operations. It may be photos, it may be instructions on setups of jigs and fixtures. Programs got to run smooth. You have to have everything dialed in so that there is no need for communication between the people who created it and the people who are executing. And that is really important on third shift. Nobody's going to answer a text at 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's also really important for second shift too. And it's an investment. And once you get over that hump, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah. So let's go back to our job here.
Yeah.
It seems like we can probably play with this overhead piece.
Yep.
Theoretically, I could say, all right, I'm not going to allocate any of my overhead. Now, this feels like a pretty significant drop. And maybe it's slightly less on the direct labor and there's a little bit of overhead. How do you approach it?
It depends on, are you trying to be opportunistic and
I want to
throw
win.
out?
I want to win
Yeah.
it. It's a foundational customer for me. It's going to seed my second shift. How aggressive do you get? And Jay, are there rules of thumb? Because God forbid you come in and second shift or third shift has run parts and all the blanks are wrong. God forbid. Like rules of thumb to make sure that I don't put myself in a position where this costs me this base EBITDA number. It's actually not accretive. It's a leech on the business. How do I think about this and how do I make sure I protect myself?
That's a great point. Let's take the overhead out so that there's zero overhead in this job. And so that means that instead of 2 million, our revised proposal could be 1.4 million. Yep. And that actually gives us a little higher EBITDA, but let's keep the EBITDA number where it is. You want to make sure that you can justify taking out that overhead.
So now material is 42% of the job.
Yep.
And
right. And that's right. And I'm glad you put that number up. So we have an exact number. So now you're 43% for material. And what I was told, hammered in my head by one of my mentors who owned a large sheet metal shop, was you never have a job where the material's more than 50% of the part for exactly what you said. If you've got to remake it, 42% starts to get a little scary. So you might use the spreadsheet and come back and say, my max is 40%. Because I'm going to have some labor in there. So if I have to remake it, But bottom line is, no, I never want to go over 40% in material cost.
Got it. So it seems like you can get pretty aggressive with this job. Now, the
Mhm.
things that would make me really nervous if I'm looking at this, just advising the shop, is there's there's no electricity. There's not like when you went to second shift, did your insurance costs go up? Did anything change?
I don't remember because we did it so early on in the formation of the company.
I keep coming back to that initial statement that you had of need to understand what are fixed and what are variable. Because I could
Hmm.
see very quickly eroding through this 300 grand of EBITDA. All of a sudden, you realize your electricity bill's a lot higher. You realize,
Well,
yeah,
this is part of the growth of a shop, I think, too, Jason, is you're absolutely right when you look at it from a number standpoint. But if you say we're going to figure out how to reduce costs in other ways and not essentially lose any money because there are variable overhead costs, it's a way to start to push your shop to act the way that it needs to be a $20 million shop.
that is such a great point, Jay. I have the benefit of talking to a lot of people in and around this industrial supply chain space. I don't think folks understand how challenging it is to grow and scale these businesses and just
Hmm.
how much risk the shops are taking on as they make it feels like a leap of faith because in order to win it, you got to get aggressive here. Now,
Hmm.
ever, would you, would you touch this number? Would you go and would you say, actually, I'm going to take the EBITDA down to 200,000 so I can get even
Yeah,
more aggressive?
yeah, yeah. As long as I protected my EBITDA margin and it didn't erode into my other work, yeah. And you can even be a little more aggressive in you could say, all right, I'm going to take a 10% EBITDA on this, but I've got to figure out how to increase it across the $10 million of work to compensate for that lower EBITDA on that 2 million I'm taking. And you probably want to have a plan for that rather than just say I'm going to force it because the
Yeah.
consequences of not doing that are not pretty.
Yep.
So, and this is really where it's important that you have a team and not a bunch of yes people. You want everybody's commitment on this, and you want, and you, I think you have to have a team that's coming up with the solution because if you are an autocratic shop owner and you're trying to figure this all out, you won't be able to do it. And even if you come up with the answers that technically would make sense, you're not the one implementing them. You want your team to be on board. So when you pull the trigger, they feel ownership.
Yeah, that's a great advice. I do find more and more it's actually it's really awesome to see. I think when we first got into this business, first into paperless parts back in 2017,
Yeah.
it was very much the autocratic shop owner making the
Hmm.
decision. I can't tell you the number of onboardings we would get into where the estimating team would it was just handed to them. It was like shop
Hmm.
owner bought this, you're going to use this tool. And we had to
Hmm.
go back and completely change our evaluation process because we were getting into onboardings where the estimating team's like, I don't want this. I've never even seen it before. And
Hmm.
I think we've really over the last 8 years watched the industry evolve. The focus
Hmm.
on culture and on team building. I think the best shops realize they need to build a team because without the people and the labor scarcity is a real problem. Without
Hmm.
the people, they can't do anything. It's
Yeah.
your most valuable asset.
And I want to put a plug in for investing in training of your team. We budgeted 1% of our revenue for training costs. Now, we tried to get the states, we used programs such as offered by the MEPs, the manufacturing extension partners. There's a lot of state money available for training, and you definitely are going to be on the hook for 50% or more. But building your team, if you are in this for the long run, those are dollars that are the return on that investment is so huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always amazed at the number of resources out there that go under leveraged.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it the way, you have so many different organizations. You have MEP, you have trade adjustment. It's just navigating those resources and going out and asking for the help. I think training is probably arguably the easiest one to get funding for.
Yeah. And there's people out there who can help you. The SCORE, I forget what that stands for exactly, but the RE is retired executives. They're great free project people. I want to go back though to the spreadsheet of where we've arrived.
Yeah.
Originally, we were talking about adding $2 million in revenue. And after we took out the overhead and reduced our EBITDA, the number now is 1.3 million. That seems to me a little light. I'd probably go in between 1.4 and 1.5 and see if we can win the job at that price. And then if not, are we close? What do we got to do? And, if they really want to bring you on as a supplier and they're looking at you as a partner rather than, okay, it's solely on cost, we're not going to invest in these guys. And what I mean by invest is not so much money, but time and helping you. If they're trying to expand their supplier base, grow you as a shop, they'll work with you to help you get to the price. And as long as you, I think, come in somewhat reasonably in the get-go.
Yeah. Is that a discussion? How do you frame that? Like if you're having that discussion, what would you say?
It depends on the person you're interacting with at the purchasing level, at the buying level, whether they actually are pushing paper or they are more strategic. It depends on how they're compensated, because I remember one buyer who I worked with, shipping was not something that they were bonused on or measured on. So they would, with a wink, tell us to increase our shipping costs a little bit. It depends on, therefore, the quality of the person, but also the relationship that they and you are willing to invest in the time. I think the face-to-face is, things go around in full circle and nobody takes people out to lunch anymore. So that's what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
Build that relationship.
What's old is new again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you a question. Let's say this job is actually a 5-year LTA where that 1.45 isn't a 1-year deal, but it's actually guaranteed for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's going to be a lot of legalese around that and contract BS that you have to navigate. But let's just assume all things considered equal, that 1.45 is now a 5-year deal. Are you thinking about this and the execution of this any differently, or is it still same approach?
Yes, definitely. I'm thinking of it because what I'm looking at is if there's any ways that I can figure out cost savings, and depending on how the contract's structured, assuming they're not going down on price, and maybe the price is fixed and you've got to eat any inflation costs or any sort of other unseen variables besides the material pricing, the cost savings accrue to you. So it incentivizes you and your team to figure out how to make the parts better. Maybe there's a better piece of equipment. Maybe there is some automation. Maybe you suck it up and you do it on an extended first shift the first year, but then you win another contract because you've learned stuff and now you feel confident in putting that third shift in place. If it's a 5-year LTA for me, I'm definitely more interested in it, of course, based upon the legal terms.
Yeah, it's really helpful, Jay. I was just trying to cover all the scenarios. Anything else? I mean, I think this is where we shook out.
Well, you have to look at the longer term trends, and Peter Zion, who I love, he's a geopolitical thinker. He is convinced that because of the deglobalization, that the U.S. and North America, let's put all the trade, the tariff stuff aside for a minute, needs to double its industrial base over the next decade. And that means there's a lot of work coming in. And I want to be positioned as a shop owner to take advantage of that work because we don't have the manufacturing capacity in the US really to do that. We're going to have to figure it out. If I gain the skill set to bring in jobs like this, as that manufacturing capacity becomes more constrained, I'm going to look better and better to other folks. If I have that second and or third shift in place, I can take in more contracts, and I may actually be able to take them in at higher prices because the constraint of capacity. I think there's a golden opportunity, and this type of job is an investment, not only in the growth of your shop now, but it positioning you for the opportunities in the future.
Yeah, I think our customers are starting to feel it. We are seeing unbelievably record high quote volumes going through the platform right now. It's a pretty exciting time to be in manufacturing. I think there's always a little bit of tumultuous waters, and there's always, who knows what's going to happen. But a lot of signals are pointing to your point, the deglobalization really driving work back to the U.S. and North America.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for shop owners, and I think it's also if you're an OEM, you want to develop your supply base now and start thinking of them not as simply a vendor. And somebody had told me that they didn't like the term vendor because you thought of somebody selling hot dogs. But if you're an OEM treating your suppliers as vendors and not as partners, you're going to get squeezed out as you need more capacity, yet the supply base is not keeping up with that capacity. So the OEMs who are learning to work with the shops and who are truly interested in partnering with them, they are going to have that capacity open to them because they've proven themselves as good partners. And it's not just a lot of lip service at the time when they really need you.
I've never heard the term supply chain resiliency thrown around more often than in the last 18 months. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What's your goal? Resiliency. Oh, interesting. So it's not cost savings. Well, that's interesting, but we're more interested in resiliency. And I think there's been a really, really impactful convergence of the combination of technology to measure the total ownership cost of a project to actually look and see what the impact of disruption is. So if parts are late or if a supplier goes out, now I can quantify this production line sat for 3 days because of this incident. Here is the dollar impact of that. And I think that people kind of, they had a high level understanding of the cost, but now you can really isolate specific incidents. And I think the approach to supply chain management is going to be changing pretty dramatically. I think people are going to be looking at this concept of resiliency and partnership across the supply chain. So I resonate with your vendor comment. We think of our customers as partners, right? And I think that is the way to have the relationship, because you want to work with partners. I don't work with a vendor. I buy something from a vendor and they go away. And I think it's something, it cannot be overstated. And your point around take people out to lunch, sit down, understand what they're doing. So much we try to model after the Toyota way and just-in-time manufacturing, but we lose all the principles of the relationship that enables, that's the foundation that whole structure is built on. Mutual success and resiliency. And I sometimes I think our culture can lead us, and the way our stock market and quarterly earnings and everything else can lead us to be a little bit more short-sighted sometimes.
the pandemic showed us there is a cost to not being resilient.
Big time.
Yeah.
So to put a bow on it, I think this is where we're shaking out. And obviously there's a bunch of math that we can do in the background to make sure that this is going to work out the way we want it to, but high level, broad strokes, we're taking our EBITDA up here, which is great, increasing our EBITDA margin. We were able to get aggressive on the job. I guess the only other question I would ask for you is, does this set a bad precedent with this customer?
Well,
Obviously, there's going to be overhead increases at some point. I mean, is this just one of those where just this is a growth opportunity, take it and screw the precedent? What do you think?
I say screw the precedent. You need to make that first step, and then afterwards you can evaluate whether it makes sense to take more work from that customer or take the skill set that you've created and apply that to someone else.
Awesome. Good stuff, Jay.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. This is fun. I really appreciate
This is great, Jason. It makes me wish I still owned a shop when I get into stuff like this. I think, again, there's so much opportunity, and I'm living through our customers now.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time. I think the next 5 years in manufacturing are going to be just lightning with everything coming on the market. So grab some more time. We can talk about AI. We can talk about what you're seeing in the changing landscape with software and technology and how that's going to impact the market. I think those will be some fun discussions.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks,
Awesome.
Jason.
Thanks for listening to the Job Shop Show podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. You can also leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Not only do I read every single one, it also helps me understand what content matters most to you. Thanks again for listening to the Job Shop Show.